So today is special. It's not just Mission Sunday, but it's Alabaster Sunday. And I've been doing this, if you've been a Nazarene for any length of time, like I have, I've been doing this since I was a little kid, where you bring your offering and you pour it into, and you hear all the change, and it's exciting. It's exciting as a kid, and it's even more exciting as an adult, because I realize now the power of that coin and where it goes in God's kingdom. It's a powerful thing to teach our kids, so I'm so excited we get to do that today. It's been a long time coming. How Alabaster Sunday started in the Church of the Nazarene is in 1945, they were looking for a new way that could include more people into the mission of the Church of the Nazarene. If you don't know, the Church of the Nazarene in particular is a church that is globally known. I mean, it's an international church that has churches in almost every country of the world. It's pretty cool. So in 1945, a woman named Elizabeth Venom came up with this idea. She said she was actually on a plane, I believe, when I read the story. And she was reading the story in Mark chapter 14 of the woman that came to Jesus in Bethany and poured out this alabaster of expensive perfume, and she poured it on Jesus' feet. And if you remember in that story, what happened is the disciples that were around Jesus got angry. They said, why would you take this expensive perfume that we could have sold and bought food or helped the widows and the poor? Why would you pour it over Jesus? And Jesus says, this is what is good. She is honoring me in the way that she sees fit. So this woman, Elizabeth Venom, was reading this story, and it came to her that this is what we should be doing, that this is a way that we can symbolically, in these little cardboard boxes, pour out our alabaster, something that's of worth to us that we can give to God. In fact, the quote that she always said was, you give up a want to meet a need. So these coins might not seem like much to us as adults. It seems like just pocket change. But to kids especially, you can use coins to buy candy and games or all these things. So it's something that you want that you're going to give up in place of giving it to God for a need that he sees fit around the world. When she created this idea, the idea was that participation is the main goal, that everybody can give a little bit and find a way to build the kingdom. Because it used to be, if you couldn't afford to go on a missions trip or give a large sum of money to the church, you had no way really to support the mission field and the way that the Church of the Nazarene is building missions around the world. And this way, everybody can make a difference. And that is such a cool thought. The scripture that they give us for this lesson comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 11. And it says, you will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. So I want to ask you this morning, how generous are you? On a scale of like 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself? If you just think about that. I think each one of us has the desire to be generous. I think that's a very popular idea in social media and in just our culture, right? Especially with the millennials, that generation today, they're very excited about constantly giving back. All of the new, I watch Shark Tank a lot, and all of the best ideas that they come up with is, we're going to give a portion of this to charity, and everybody cheers. It's such a great idea. We want to give to charity. Everybody wants to be involved in a cause. So how generous you are in today's culture is kind of a buzzword. People love that. But I want to ask, how are you being generous? How are you being generous? Because the way that we are generous matters. I Googled generous people because I was just curious what it would come up with. And it gave me this list, I think it was in Forbes or something, of the 20 most generous people around the world. And you can imagine the number one person is like Bill Gates, because he has the Bill Gates Foundation. They give billions, literally billions with a B, dollars around the world to give to money to different charities. But all of the top 20 people that were listed there, I dug a little deeper because most of them I didn't know. Some of them were even Saudi princes or something. I don't know. There was a lot of people on that list that I didn't recognize. So I dug a little deeper, and I found out that of those 20, about 16 of them are declared atheists. That was a little challenging to me, because this idea of generosity comes from God, right? So you would think that we would be the most generous people, that people that are giving out of their money, their own money, to help others would be Christ-following people. But no, these people are atheists. Not just agnostic, where, yeah, there might be a God, but I don't believe. No, they literally don't believe that there is a creator that created another human being. So why would they give their money to these other human beings to help people eat or learn, or hospitals around the world? What I discovered when I dug into Bill Gates in particular, he went on a trip and saw the hunger and need of a human being, and something within him, he says, something within him said, this is not right. I want to say, if I was sitting across from Mr. Bill Gates, I would say, that something is God. God gives us that desire. When we see someone who's in need, that desire wells up in us to help them. What's hard in America is we don't see the need very often. A lot of times when we see it, it's like through a commercial. Back in the day, I remember these commercials that would come on and they'd show Ethiopian children with like snot coming down, and they looked so pathetic and sad, and it would cause you to feel this thing, and now you need to give to the World Hunger Fund. And it was this big deal. They would do it with puppies too. So it's kind of it's a thing they do where they pull at your heartstrings. But nowadays, I don't even have commercials. I watch Hulu and it's like there's no commercials. So that's not a way that we get to see what the world is in need of nowadays. So the only way that you're going to see it is if you seek it out, or maybe if you go to church and people like me on one Sunday a quarter tell you how bad it is around the world. But the idea of seeing a need and wanting to fulfill it doesn't come up very often in our lives. Luckily for our church, as we've already talked about, we have a pastor who I think is pretty great. I'm a little biased, but he immediately saw a need here in Livingston County that most people didn't even know existed, of people that were needing home when it's cold. They need a home all the time, but at least when it's cold, they desperately need a place to sleep. And we were able to meet that need, and we're constantly meeting it throughout the cold weather months, which is awesome. But I want to challenge just us who are sitting in here. How are you being generous, and why? Is it out of that desire, or is it because someone else might see you give and say, oh, you're such a good person? If you can put it on social media that you gave to something and like put, for my birthday, I'm giving to this charity. Don't I look great? Is that why you're doing it? Because that's not what God is looking for. God is enriching us so that we can be generous out of the overflow that God has given us, out of the abundance that God has given us. We are supposed to be giving in that way. Generous people give to see the impossible become possible. Amen? That's what I want. I want to see something that I can't imagine happening. I want to see God do it. And if he can do it through something that I've given or something that I've done, some small piece, I can be a part of that. That is when lives are changed. And I'm not talking about the people we're giving to, but my life has been changed. There's a story in Matthew chapter 14. It's pretty popular. It's pretty famous. I say popular. I guess, I don't know if the Bible's popular, but I've heard it a lot when I was a kid. It's a very popular kids story. And it's Jesus. He's up on this mountain, and he's giving his sermon. There's 5,000 people. I'm sure it was way more than that, because back then they only counted the men. But so there's probably triple that if you consider women and children. So there's all these people. They've been sitting there all day listening to Jesus teach. And all of a sudden, there's rumblings throughout this group that people are starting to get hungry. They weren't anticipating being there all day. And so the disciples come to Jesus and they say, listen, these people are getting hungry. We need to come up with a plan. I don't know what we're going to do, but these people want food. So Jesus does this crazy thing, and he says, he takes this boy who's sitting, and he says, come, what do you have? They said, well, all we have is, 2 fish and 5 loaves. Did I get that right? Is it 2 loaves and 5 fish? Okay. It's 2 fish and 5 loaves. Okay, I didn't write that part down, so I had to remember it. Anyway, so it's 2 fish, 5 loaves. So this is all they have to feed, potentially 15,000 people. It's impossible. The disciples say, there's no way. What are we going to do, Jesus? And Jesus takes it, and he says, just put it in these baskets and go out and feed the people. And one by one, they feed the people, and they're watching as it's just multiplying, and it's feeding every single person that's there. That's a pretty cool story. I've heard it since I was little. Well, here's the part that I think we don't talk about very often. I want to talk about that little boy. Because here's what this little boy did. He had come to hear Jesus, and he was prepared, unlike some of these adults. He had brought a lunch. His mom packed him a lunch, and he was ready to eat it. And if you think about one little boy with 2 fish and 5 loaves, that's kind of a lot of food for one kid. I don't know what this kid looked like, but I'm just telling you, that's kind of a lot for a kid. So anyway, so this kid brings a lunch. He's prepared. And then Jesus asks him to give it up. Jesus says, give me your lunch. And the kid thinks, Am I going to get it back? Like, what do I do now? If I give you my lunch, what am I going to eat? You know what I mean? And of course, the Bible doesn't go into detail of what the kid says. Obviously, maybe he said nothing. But the thing is, the kid gave Jesus his lunch. And for most of us, especially as a little kid, that's probably a really important thing. He doesn't know how he's going to get it back. He's just got to say, okay, Jesus, here's what I have. And that's what Alabaster is all about. That's what missions is all about, is we take whatever we bring, whatever we have. If it's not much, maybe it's a lot. Some of us have better jobs and you can give more. Some of us have not much and all you can bring is the change in these boxes. But whatever it is, if you give it to God, he can multiply it and make the impossible possible. How cool is that? Don't you want to be a part of that? I want to tell you that Alabaster, something that's cool about this particular offering is 100% of it. So every coin that goes in that box goes to missions and building structures around the world. When I say structures, I mean mostly it's church buildings. Sometimes it's hospitals, houses for pastors so that they can live near the church. Some pastors travel miles and miles every Sunday by foot or by motorcycle to get to the church that they're trying to serve. So these funds 100% go to building structures, which to us may not seem like it's that important. But when you think about walking 5 miles to the nearest church, how likely are you to go? I mean, I've been in church my whole life, and I've seen people that they live a mile away from a church, and they're not going on Sunday morning. Some of you drive maybe 15, 20 minutes, sometimes further, and you'll come in. But if you had to walk that, would you come? I don't think so. I want to tell you about one church that I was a part of. I got to see the impossible be possible. I went to Kenya several times, actually, about 5 times. But the first time, we went to a place called Awaso Nero. It's about 2 hours outside of Nairobi. It's in the Rift Valley. I'm going to show you some pictures. This is the site where we came. It's mostly cattle land. The Maasai live there. And we had decided we were going to build a church with funds our church had volunteered to build. So every day we went, and on a Monday we started, and we put bricks down and stones, and we slowly started to watch it. This is, I think, Tuesday. So we were already 2 days in, and it's starting to come up. And what we noticed was the kids would stop by on their way to school as they were walking to the water or as they were going to school, and they were thinking, oh my goodness, look at this. Like, it used to be nothing like yesterday, and they'd come home from school and it was a little bigger, and then in the morning it'd be a little bigger. And they started calling it the Miracle Church because they were watching this throughout the week just develop and become this building that they had never seen be there before. And by Sunday, this is the Church of the Nazarene that we had built. It was a miracle, and people came. People that lived nearby and had never been to church because it was far for them. They came, and Sunday morning we preached the word, and we sang songs of worship, and people were prayed over, and people gave their lives to Christ in that church that we had built in 1 week. It was miraculous. You can see the villagers that came. This is the church now. I just got this last week from the pastor there at that church. It's growing. It's thriving. The community is healthy. You see all those little kids. I think of how exciting that is that all those kids now are hearing about God because of something that I was a part of. How cool. I want to tell you one more cool thing about that church is that the third or fourth mission that we went on, after we had built a building, we were trying to give them water now to this community because that's another practical need that the community needed. They had no clean water. The closest water was about a mile's walk to this hole, and it was dirty water. It's where all the cattle washed themselves. It's where people washed their clothes, and this was their drinking water. So we were determined that we were going to find them water. We were going to dig a well, and we were going to get them water. So we had a team come out. We paid for a team to come out and survey where would be the best place to drill a well. And I want to show you a picture of where the best place was. It was about 3 feet outside of the front door of that church. How cool is that? That God not only provides living water for his people, but he provided practical clean water right outside of the church. And I showed you that first picture. It was like miles of just cattle land. We could have built that church anywhere, but that is the place that God dedicated for his people to meet. And I want to tell you that the change we put in here, it's just going to build those buildings. But God will build a church. He will bring people together. He will bring his people, and he will build the church in that place if we give what little we have to offer this morning. The second thing that generous people do is they give out of the byproduct of their personal transformation. There is never a time, in my opinion, where someone in a church has given unless they understand the power of what God has done for them and the opportunity he gives us to give to somebody else. Generosity rises out of the heart of one who's been given life and wants to give back. Amen? I want to tell you one more story about that particular time in Kenya. There was a guy named Chief John. He's the guy, the Kenyan, on the, what is that, your left? On the left, that's Chief John. He is the chief over the Maasai tribe that lives there on that land. And the first time I went, we met with him, we prayed over the land that we were going to build the church, and we found out as we were there that he didn't even believe in God. He was this guy, he had donated the land because he thought it would be good for his people, because his people wanted a church. So he donated land, but he didn't know what it was all about. He had never heard of the Church of the Nazarene. He didn't believe in God, but he was willing to give us this land. He thought it would bring prosperity to his people. Well, over the times that we were there, the other guy, Ken Johnson, on the other side, who is from my church, we built a friendship. We were there 5 times. Every 6 months we went back. And they built this incredible friendship, the two of these guys. And so much so that Chief John would call him constantly. Because when you call from Kenya to the States, it's like 2 cents a minute or something. It's very cheap for them to call. And P.S., everyone in Africa has a cell phone. Even when they're walking around in like tribal gear with their sheep, they have a cell phone, I promise you. But so it's very cheap for them to call. So Chief John would call all the time and talk to Ken and see how it was going. And over those few visits, about the 3rd visit in, Chief John came running up to us when we got there and said, I know Jesus. I know Jesus. He had accepted God for the first time. And what's even cooler is, he is the guy that sent me those pictures because he is now the pastor of that church that we built. How cool is that? So there's one more picture I want to show you, and this is Chief John. He planted this tree outside of the church that we built for Ken Johnson in honor of him. And the reason he did that is because in 2014, Ken Johnson at 37 was doing an Ironman. He was a very fit guy, and he dropped dead. And it was so hard to watch. But the thing that was so amazing is to see the legacy that he had built, the eternal value of what he did. And I want to tell you, Ken was a very powerful guy here in America. He had his own company. He was an engineer. He worked with the government and big contracts. He was a wealthy guy. But I would tell you right now, Ken would give everything he had to the missions. He would go on every trip. He would give every penny he could to missions. And he eternally changed not only Chief John's life, but that community forever. John Wesley said, I judge all things only by the price they will gain in eternity. We can either be doing things with our time and our money that are going to serve us here on earth, or we can be giving generously to things that are going to change eternity for God's people around the world and here. I don't want you to only think that we're just talking about missions around the world. I know I talked about Africa a lot just because that's my personal experience. But we have missions here in America that need it. Believe it or not, there's countries around the world now that are sending missions to America because we are lost. And so today we give money that is going to go around the world. But next week, the money that we give in our offerings goes to our community. And our community is just as lost, if not more, to be honest. than people around the world. So I want to challenge you not just to give today, not just to give to Alabaster, but to be a giving, generous people. God's people are generous because they are giving out of the overflow of their personal transformation. Amen, church?